Today, I think I have a pretty decent chance of making a little trouble. Why would I be making trouble? Because today we're going to take a look at a well-beloved verse that is frequently abused. It's abused in the sense that it is treated as though it says something that it does not say. It's a verse that if you read it quickly in English, it can serve as a very powerful evangelistic tool. It makes an illustration that is useful for evangelism and trying to get people to make a decision to become Christians. But it only works, it's only useful if you are willing to either consciously or unconsciously ignore the grammar and the context of the verse. So what is this verse? This verse is Revelation chapter 3, verse 20. I'm going to start with my own translation, then we're going to take a look at the key part in many popular versions. So here's Revelation 3:20, my own translation. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone should hear my voice and should open the door, and also is bracketed in the Greek text, I shall enter in to or before him, and I will dine with him and he with me. So, famous verse used by evangelists all around. You know, Jesus is knocking on the door of your heart. Won't you open and let him come in? And the part that creates the problem here is the I shall enter in to or before him. Let's take a look at several popular versions. The King James Version says, I will come in to him. The Revised Standard Version says, I will come in to him. The ESV, the English Standard Version, says, I will come in to him. And the NIV, the New International Version, says, I will come in. The Mounce Reverse Interlinear says, I will enter his house. Why does Dr. Mounce, William Mounce, the famous biblical Greek teacher, professor, why does he say, I will enter his house when house is not in the verse? Because Dr. Mounce recognizes that within the context and the use of the preposition pros, knocking on a door from the outside and being invited inside implies entry into a house. He is giving us the fullest sense of the meaning of the verse while in fact taking some liberty. But the challenge here is not that. The challenge is in the opposite direction. The temptation is to use this verse as an appeal that Jesus is standing not at the door of a house, but at the door of your heart and wants to enter your heart. You can hear an evangelist right now saying, won't you open your heart and let him in? It's an effective illustration. It's just not what the verse says. So the key part here, let's take a look at this in Koine. The key part here is eusomai pros auton. So eusomai is the future form of erkomai. I go in or I come in. I enter. So eusomai, I shall enter in. Then we get pros auton, to him. I shall enter in to him, which is what the majority of those popular versions translated as, right? We saw that. But pros, when used in a spatial context, and this is clearly a spatial context, I'm outside a door, I'm knocking, waiting for an answer to be allowed to come in. When I enter in, I'm moving from one space into another. This is a spatial context, right? When pros is used in a spatial context, it has the meaning of to, toward, or before. Not before like preceding, but before in the presence of. So, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone should hear my voice and should open the door, I shall enter in before in his presence, and I shall dine with him and he with me. Right? That's what the verse tells us. So I shall enter in to or before into the presence of him. That spatial context is undeniable. But if you wanted to say, if you want to use it as an illustration and say, well, Jesus is asking you to open your heart and let him come in. Sounds like a fantastic illustration. It's a great metaphor, but that's clearly not what the text says, because if you wanted to say that, you have to eliminate the preposition pros. And every one of the texts that I look at, when I look at the critical apparatus, there's no indication that there's a manuscript out there without pros. Pros is the thing, pros auton. Eis eleusomai pros auton. I shall enter in to, toward, or before him. If we eliminate the pros, then auton, the pronoun, becomes the direct object of the verb, and he would be saying, I will enter into him. I will enter into that person. If we were to replace pros with eis, a different preposition, it would also be saying, I shall enter into him, into the person. But that's not what it says. The preposition is pros. So look at this. What the verse says, what Revelation 3:20 says is, I shall enter in to him, not I shall enter into him. Am I drawing too fine a distinction? Not if you want to take the text as it is written, because we can't just throw away that pros. So look at this meme that I enjoy, because I love language and grammar and punctuation. Let's eat grandma versus let's eat grandma. See the big difference? That's the kind of difference we're talking about. Let's eat grandma, compared to I shall enter into him, I shall enter in before, in the presence of him, versus I shall enter into him. Quite a different thing. The classic door to your heart sermon, consciously or unconsciously, is reading it as I shall enter into him. I shall go inside this person, and I shall dine with him and he with me. But the context is spatial. Outside the house versus inside the house culminates with a piecemeal. In covenant language, when you make a covenant or renew a covenant, there's a meal, there's a piecemeal that's shared that shows that we are in good relationship. When was the last time you invited all your enemies to supper, right? That's not the way supper works. You don't want to eat with people that you detest, or that detest you, or that you have fear of. A piecemeal, a part of the covenant piecemeal, is we're at peace with one another. Our relationship is good. We've renewed and restored this bond that we had. In the context of Revelation 3:20, that makes a lot of sense. This is in the letter to the church at Laodicea that has gone neither hot nor cold but lukewarm, and they're being called to revival. They're being called to renew their relationship. Let's get right together. If you bring me back into the center, we'll eat together, we'll be at peace, the covenant will be restored. Right? Good stuff. But what it isn't is it's not evangelistic, because the letter is to the church, to the angel of the church at Laodicea. It's not to outsiders. It's not to the pagans and the heathens. It's to a church, people who are already believers, but who have backslidden a little, who've slipped, and who need some revival and renewal. So to use it for evangelism, it's a great illustration. It preaches so well. But that's an abuse of the text if we treat it as though it says, I shall enter into him, versus I shall enter in before him, in his presence. Lastly, this construction, this eis erchomai in its various forms with pros, appears in 8 other verses in the New Testament. It's a total of 9, this one and 8 others. And I'm going to put those up for you now so you can make yourself a note. You can pause, write it down, screenshot it, however you want to go about that. But here are the 8 other places where it occurs. Mark chapter 6, verse 25, Luke 1:28, Acts 10:3, Acts 11:3, Acts 16:40, Acts 17:2, and Acts 28:8. Did you notice how much of this usage is by Luke? Apparently, Luke really likes this construction, eis erchomai pros. Now, if you go back, and I encourage you to do this, and read all 8 of those other occurrences, you'll see that this construction always, without fail, expresses entry into the presence of someone else. Did you catch that? It's always about entering into the presence of someone else, whether it's in front of a group or an individual, whether it's one person entering or a pair or a trio. This is about entering into someone else's presence. Conversely, it is never used to express entry into a person or into any part of a person in any way. Okay? That sounds like it should be self-evident, right? But if you go back and look at it, all 9 uses of this construction, forms of eis erchomai with pros, are about entering into someone's presence. Revelation 3:20 is not an exception. So when Jesus says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock, and if anyone should hear my voice and should open the door, I shall enter in to his presence, and he shall dine with me, and I shall dine with him, and he with me." We will have peace, we will have covenant renewal, we will get our relationship right if he's willing to bring me back in. If the church in Laodicea renews its relationship with Christ, they can be restored and renewed and have a solid relationship. But he's not saying to the unbelievers in Laodicea, "Open your heart and let me in." All right, I've probably made enough trouble so far today. Have you heard that verse used in that open your heart kind of a way? Now, I want to say something important, 2 things important. The first is, this is a great illustration. And if you're honest about the text and use the illustration metaphorically and let people know that you're using it metaphorically, I say 3 cheers to you. Because extrapolating from the text and treating it honestly is a noble thing to do. But pretending, consciously or unconsciously, that the text says Jesus wants you to open the door of your heart and let him in, you're not being honest with the text, with yourself as an exegete, an interpreter, and you're not being honest with the audience, right? Because what the text says is not, "Let's eat grandma." It says more of, "Let's eat grandma." It says, "Let's eat, Laodiceans. Come together. Bring me back into your midst. Let's get together. We'll have a meal. We'll be at peace. We'll renew, and we'll move forward." The second thing I wanted to ask you is if you think I've made trouble here, and if you have a different point of view or perspective, please let me know in the comments. I'm always interested in what you have to say. Until we see one another again, Charis Kai Irene Humin, grace and peace to you.